Hello everyone and welcome to the first ever podcast edition for the program of creativity and innovation. My name is Musa Malik and today I have the absolute pleasure of being in the company of a really fascinating scholar. He's the director of music education and the director of the NYU Music Experience Design Lab at NYU Steinhardt. And we affectionately call it MusED.
Or MusEDLab.
MusEDLab.
Yes, it's this kind of combination bringing together music, education, technology in this research lab. So it's MusEDLab, both meaning music education with a nod to that, but really the core of what we do is experience design. So the ed also stands for that.
Brilliant. Professor Alex Ruthmann, yeah. I had to make sure that I say out your name. So welcome to Shanghai, and thank you so much for taking out the time to sit with us and share your thoughts.
It's great to be here.
For the listeners who don't really know much about MusED's work or projects, could you maybe give a short spiel about what you do?
Our lab, the Music Experience Design Lab, we research and design new technologies and experiences for music making, for learning, and audience engagement in general. And in doing that, we bring a process of collaborative design where we work together directly with young people, with educators, industry, nonprofit partners, so that they're involved in the design process for everything from the very beginning idea stages all the way to the end.
Professor, what was the inspiration to coming to Shanghai? I believe that this is your first time in Shanghai, right?
It is, yeah. Well, it was to come here and to, this is my 5th year now on faculty at NYU, and I wanted to visit the international campuses, the global campuses, and Shanghai was been high on my list, and had the opportunity to meet Professor Adam Brandenberger from the program on creativity and innovation. We started talking about our work, sharing things, and I knew there was something really special happening here, and so was fortunate to steal away a few days from New York and teaching to come here to spend time with the staff here, all the partners, and to get to know the students.
There's a really interesting comment by a gentleman known as Mr. Richard Archie. Mm-hmm. He was from Google from Education, right? Mm-hmm. And I saw his comment on the promotional video for Smart Bomb that your students produced. And what he said was that at MusED, he sees an opportunity to sort of combine higher education, K-12 schools, and startups to solve real-world problems. Yeah. I'm curious to know, what does that mean in a practical sense? What problems are we talking about?
Sure. Well, a lot of what we do in the lab is really at the intersection of designing new things and research, but also the entrepreneurial process. We're very much about supporting people at all levels to discover problems, find real-world challenges, and then using processes of design, work together with people to come up with solutions to those challenges. So at the college level, that happens through a college course that I teach every semester in designing technologies and experiences for music. But we thought, well, why should we just keep this with the college students? Is there a way we could create an opportunity in the summers to bring together entrepreneurial teams of middle school students and their teachers, high school students and their teachers, allow them to come into our space where our software architects, our designers, our coders would be able to work side by side with them in identifying challenges, in creating opportunities to solve challenges in their everyday world at the intersection of the arts and technology. So we created this opportunity working together with an arts ed nonprofit in New York City called the Urban Arts Partnership, and also in partnership with Google, just to open up the space for 6 weeks to help these students take their ideas, develop a tangible prototype, get feedback from the end users that they're designing with, and see where it goes from there.
That sounds absolutely fascinating, Professor. And if you haven't guessed by now, I'm a lover of music. Sure. But I come from a very non-formal, non-academic background. Never really had the chance to study music theory. But I was fascinated by one blog post that I saw by your students. They were talking about how difficult music theory is and how the challenges that they were. And I was amazed that there's a actual Twitter account dedicated to rants against music theory.
Yes.
For me, as an outsider, it's incredible. I can't imagine why somebody would find learning music difficult. Could you maybe explain what are some of the challenges that students are facing?
Well, sure. Well, I think a lot of it gets down to the root of formal schooling versus informal schooling.
Right.
And a lot of the traditional approaches to teaching music and music theory are rooted in Western classical music. And there's a lot of structures, there's a lot of historical ways of making sense of that music and studying how composers do that. But today there's often a wide gap between the kinds of music that kids are interested in and the theories that were developed from, the old composers of the 1800s and 1700s. And so there's this tension often, at least we run into it at NYU and in all sorts of places, between people who want to learn how music is made. They want to make personally meaningful music, but oftentimes if they go to school, they're forced to start back in the medieval ages and learn it sequentially from medieval to Renaissance to Baroque to classical and into today. And so the traditional pedagogies, the techniques for teaching that people engage with for learn, you often have to spend a long time before you can get to the music you love.
Right.
So that really, that's why the rants are there with that, because, and really, today's music was made in very different ways than, maybe Mozart or Beethoven worked with that. It's a much more technologically facilitated process. There's multiple songwriters and producers, and it's much more of a shared effort between the initial ideas that might get, fleshed out in the songwriter's notebook to the final recording we hear streaming on our earbuds on the subway.
Right. Going off on that, do you think that there might be any challenges that you face when it comes to, say, multiculturalism in the music and design thinking process at your lab? Is there like some sort of an overemphasis on some classical music in comparison to something that someone from Pakistan might actually want to contribute?
Yeah, well, the thing in the lab is that we really kind of bring more of a generic design process that's iterative, that takes its influences from lean startup, from design thinking, from in education, from reflective practice, and even in engineering you see it with agile kind of processes to development, where you first start with an idea, you develop a little test, you build something, you see if it works, you then refine it, and you kind of continue through that cycle again. So the projects that we have on the MusEDLab site with everything that's there, those are a reflection of design with a very specific audience. And so some of those are with the New York Philharmonic and classical music and an audience that they're trying to bring in. But another group was with elementary math and music teachers trying to find a way to bring math to life and shapes and geometry through grooves.
Right.
So, it doesn't really matter. The design process itself is something that we like to apply to whoever that is, and we'd love the opportunity to work with some Pakistani musicians or learners and see what came from that. And that's really one of the reasons we're here in Shanghai, is to come here. So we've built a bunch of things. We have a design process that we use with teachers, and we're very interested in now bringing that here to Shanghai and develop partnerships with schools, with teachers, etc., and to see what might come out of those design processes. And we expect they'll be very different than that. I wouldn't expect that our Groove Pizza app that we built over in New York City, that we would come up with the same kind of thing working with teachers and students here. There would be something unique that the local culture brings to that. And that's why I really like a design process. And so as much as, you go on the website and see the cool projects, it's really about this process of starting with your end users and designing with them so that their voice shows up in everything that we do, so that the byproduct isn't just something that an expert or us academics with our research hats on, think might be good for that, but we actually involve the end users in the process so that we know that. And it's not really about what works for us, it's really about what works for those end users as designers.
Has there been a change in the way you perceive music, like compared to before you were an academic, and now, like after you have researched it? Yeah,
well, I mean, one of the pleasures that we're able to get in what we're working on is we're not just before we got into this, we were the music that I would be experiencing is the music that I played, that playing in ensembles and going to concerts and clubs and listening to it on the radio. But one of the great technological things that we're starting to see open up is labels and different music groups opening up the multi-track stems. to the recording. So, when we were developing our Play With Your Music online course with Peter Gabriel, he released to us for the first time his multi-track stems to In Your Eyes and Sledgehammer. So we were able to individually isolate the vocals separate from the guitar, from the bass, because we were working with him to develop kind of a creative online set of learning resources to unpack the creative processes of audio engineers and producers, which they get to work in the studio with that and make that available. So it was working with them. It was working the New York Philharmonic, for instance, these major orchestras. They've actually have these very deep archives of multi-microphone recordings. They might record the orchestra recording we hear with 18 or 30 microphones, and they're sitting there on hard drives. So we now get to go in and kind of be, digital anthropologists going into their archives, and we don't just get the final product that everybody heard in the hall. We actually get all the parts and can kind of go back and learn and discover new things. So that's really one of the cool things as a researcher getting to this is getting to play with these new digital primary sources that not everybody has access to, and then we get to say, ooh, what can we build from this? What might help an audience better understand a piece of music if we were able to build a little interface or a little project that could highlight some of these little things that, are in the recordings if you listen really deeply and you know what to listen for. But here we can solo them up and really, hear the personality and all the individualism that went into them.
Brilliant. So one thing that really baffles me personally is to somehow come to this definite mental mapping of the idea and the concept of music technology in itself. You have so many web-based packages where people can just go online, they can maybe assess their musical capabilities, download curriculums, all that stuff. Does anything that help you become a better musician or gain better musical awareness about yourself, does that qualify as music tech? Or are we talking about something geekier, a more comprehensive integration of software and hardware?
No, I think it's always a continuum across there. That one kind of popular definition of a technology is something that existed after you were born. If it existed before, then it's not with that. So when we're looking at that with technology, it's really with a broad umbrella. I'm dually appointed in NYU Steinhardt's program in music technology and in music education, and we're constantly as a faculty wrestling with what constitutes music tech, not just today to be relevant today, but to help prepare our students for what is going to be the future with that. So it's everything from very cutting edge AR, VR, neural net modeling of music, all that kinds of things that go, all those algorithms that help Spotify determine what music you might have next coming on your iPod. With that, everything from that to very simple things like just a website where the materials are there. And I look at it more in under the umbrella of where is music education, because our software everywhere is music education. Everywhere there's music is an opportunity for education, and the world's largest music educator is really YouTube and online sites with videos, and that really comes down to the end user's ability to be able to identify, ooh, I have a problem with this, or ooh, I want to play that song. They can go on there and search for that. So as long as they can identify that and kind of go back and forth, the technology can be this great teacher with that. But there are always limitations to that, where you want to have that feedback, and technology is getting better and better at being able to give you that feedback with there. But right now there's still hope for the live teacher and need for that for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that plays in very well into the next thing that I want to ask you is that many people can take very deterministic stances when it comes to the role of technology and its impact on society and the people at large. I was going through a paper that you co-authored, and I came across this argument put forward by your colleague, Evan Tobias, and I quote, that the manifestation of technology can be an expressive or artistic endeavor that enables creative possibility, or it can also be used in an instrumental sense to control and dehumanize human reality. Yeah. That sounds fascinating, but I have no idea what that means.
Sure.
So could you help me out with that?
Yeah, I mean, the article itself, it was written by me and several of my colleagues, because there's often, particularly in music education in the world, the language in and around the description of technology is that the technology can do X or the technology can do Y, where really it's anthropomorphized into this almost sentient being that has this agency that can control us. And so a lot of the article was really trying to come back to realizing that we're humans. The technology is a byproduct of a human process, and it's put into use by humans. And to kind of reclaim the control and the power and the agency for the end user, that it's not just what the technology can do. It's not, the iPad can't do X. It's how are you as a teacher using that iPad in the classroom? Why would you choose to use the iPad?
Right.
What is it affording that you couldn't do otherwise? And really stepping back critically and evaluating, is this something that is furthering my goals as a teacher, my creative goals as a musician, or is it something that's really just out there because, I'm going to hook up this neural net and I'm going to get these things going just because it's the cool buzzword, or I'm going to now take this experience and put it into AR, VR with my Vive and go through that and look, and isn't it cool? And that's cool, but is that your goal? Is the goal to be cool, or is the goal to solve another issue? Is the goal to be expressive, to learn?
So like the agency of the musician is paramount in this case. Right?
That was our argument. Yeah.
Right. Brilliant. You spend a lot of time helping novices gain access to music education, but I believe that utilizing music technology to train people who are already really good, who are making their musical careers, that would be really important as well. So you have some technologies like vocal spectrography. Do you believe that this type of real-time visual feedback is something that actually enhances their talents or their understanding of the music, or is it just a gimmicky toy?
Well,
how would you credibly assess its effectiveness?
Well, again, it's a technology, it's a tool,
right?
So it doesn't necessarily have use value unless it's set into a real world context by somebody that's there. I think specifically to vocal spectrography, any kind of visualization that's giving you feedback, whether that's your heart rate monitor or it's or this kind of real-time spectrogram of the timbre of your voice or what's going on in there, as long as you understand what it's giving you, it can give you insight that maybe you don't hear with that. And so this is one of the common misnomers in Western culture, that music is an aural phenomenon. That we have a tendency to historically teach music as sound and what we hear, but music in everyday life is multisensory. It's felt, it's tasted, it's heard, it's smelled. I mean, it's physically experienced. And there's a huge long tradition of just isolating and talking about music from just the aural sense. But so opening up to haptic feedback, opening up to technologies that allow you to see in real time, or to be able to look after real time, because learning an instrument's hard. Musicians and spend a long time practicing, whether that's digital musicians or acoustic musicians, and we can't fully process everything while we're learning something. That's really hard for us. And we know from neuroimaging studies that when you're learning something, particularly music, there's so much happening, so many parts of your brain and body are engaged in making music, that it's often a challenge at the very beginning to be able to also step back and separate yourself and listen and objectively evaluate yourself. So this is really where one of the great opportunities for recorded music and recordings is a pedagogical tool, because you can record yourself, and with these visual representations giving you more info into that, you can then focus on the technique and what you're working on, record yourself, stop, go hit rewind, watch it again, and then you can start to reflect and take a step back and actually hear and move from there. So it's the combination of what the technology affords within the end user and how they're using it.
Brilliant. Another possible avenue for the application of music tech is to help special need students for musical learning as well as music performance. Are there any interesting projects in the pipeline at Mused?
Well, there've been a number of them over time, mainly coming out of the class that I teach. There's a number of students. We happen to have in New York City, there's a lot of projects, and my colleagues over in the Tandon School of Engineering have a project called the Ability Lab.
Right.
And they've been partnered with some of my students developing interfaces for helping, blind students better express themselves, people hard of hearing. There's been a number of projects in that, people with developmental disabilities and giving them expressive new interfaces for playing and even just for solving some issues in the classroom with drumming and creating some new drums where kids can still play and hit hard and work with that, but maybe reduce some of this the sensory stimulation
Right.
to help their learning, depending on what that is. So we have been fortunate to explore that, and really there's a number of wonderful teachers and therapists and people in New York City who are doing really fascinating work at the intersection of that, and we're fortunate to have them around our lab.
What is, in your opinion, the future revolutionary technology that you see in the field? So I can make my millions.
So you're millions.
Yeah, I can invest quickly.
Well, the technology I would say for that is the technology of your ears to listen.
Touche.
With that, it's really getting to know who your audience is, whether that's your students or those are your clients or those are your customers, and spending time listening, and not just listening, but being with them and understanding their needs and challenges. Because if you can really identify a real world need and a challenge, whether that's, you hear and your student, like, yep, that's their interest. That's the key to unlocking that. That's where you're going to be able to have impact with that. It's just to break that down, whatever that is, because the technologies are going to change.
Of course.
There's always going to be a new tool, and working with that. And it's really important to be at the cutting edge and to play and to really push what can happen with that. But at the end of the day, we always need to step back and see, is that just there for flash, or is there something we can pull off the shelf and just modify that is a lot cheaper, is a lot easier, that really then tells that story. And it's a little bit of a shift from the novelty and the expression to that, to like, where are we having impact, and what are those stories, and how can we best connect with those we're designing for and learning with.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Professor. I can speak on behalf of the entire NYU Shanghai community. That really means a lot that you took out time and you actually sat down and shared your thoughts with us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you are more interested in some of the amazing work being done by the Museed Lab, you can visit their website at musedlab.org, or reach out to Professor Alex Ruthmann personally at his Twitter handle, Alex Ruthmann. I have heard that you're quite social.
Yes, I am. Please find me on social media and reach out. And if you're in New York, please let us know. We'd be happy to have you come by the lab.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll be definitely back with another amazing guest next time. Bye-bye.